Hello, Haseeb. I am so excited to have you here. Welcome to the Screw Being Unhappy podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Zuzana. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here with you today.
Yes, and I am also very excited to talk to the first Pakistan's ADHD coach. And I know, because we know each other a bit, that your journey started because of your own ADHD, and that's how you start digging in, start learning about ADHD. But can you tell us a bit more about your own journey, which led you to becoming the first and, as you say, most loved Pakistan's ADHD coach?
Yeah, it's an inside joke I have with myself. Like, if you are the only one, I have to be the most beloved ADHD coach out there. But the way I got into it, I guess, was like I, as a kid, struggled myself with ADHD, and it after researching up on the topic for 17 years and having gotten really good at managing it myself, I um, I was helping other people out. I was volunteering, and I just fell in love with the job, and so I thought, why not do it formally, like full time, properly? So that's how I got into it. And there's a huge need as well. Susanna, Pakistan is a country of 240 million people, so a huge population that needs help, of which roughly I think 20% or more even are neurodivergent people who need help and support. So
Yeah,
that's how I
so
got into it.
that's really impressive. As you said, like 17 years of experience digging in into different papers and like really researching. So I believe it's amazing what you have started doing, especially as you said, the need is so huge. And
Thank you.
of course, I have no idea about Pakistan, but in my country, in Czech Republic, when I was growing up, it was not a topic at all, right? It's only recently when
Mm,
we know that some people have ADHD, and that's why it impacts the way they do things. And that brings me actually to the next question, because recently I talked to a couple of amazing humans about their productivity, and they came to me that they wanted to get stuff done, they felt overwhelmed, they wanted to get more
mm.
organized, and recently they found out that they had ADHD. So I wanted to find out, what
Right.
is the impact of ADHD on productivity, planning and executing the task, and generally having enough energy to get stuff done?
Mm. So ADHD is at the core of all these issues. And one way that I would explain to people who don't understand ADHD is it's a self-regulation issue, right? So it affects your executive functioning parts of the brain. So everything from your time management, organizational skills, regulating your emotions, motivation, it gets affected because of your ADHD. It's the way brain is wired differently. It's very much connected, and that's why such an invisible disability. That's why it's so hard to sort of get that acceptance and support from people around you, because nobody can see it.
Yeah, and maybe if you could talk a bit more about this, because um, what the people who I spoke to recently mentioned, that they felt like maybe they were lazy or they were not good at planning.
Mhm.
So what exactly, because for me, of course, it's difficult to imagine, but how exactly is it difficult? Or what do you need to do
Mhm.
to, like, how much effort you put into something to really make sure that the tasks are done?
Hmm. You can think of it as, imagine for decades blaming yourself for something that wasn't really your fault, you know, uh, thinking that, oh, I'm lazy because it's a me thing, I'm lazy, I'm not working intentionally. That's what most people with ADHD would hear from people around them, their parents, their teachers, like, hey, Haseeb, you are intentionally being difficult right now, you're intentionally not working right now, you're intentionally messing your homework up. And what it does is, over the decades, if you go undiagnosed, Susanna, is that you build up that shame and guilt, like mountains of it. So for that reason, it's very important that acceptance, that validation, that, okay, it's not me, it's because of my differently wired brain that I'm struggling right
Mm.
now. It makes all the difference. It makes all the difference. I had this one client, Zuzana, who told me that, who was this amazing mother of two, a housewife, and she had gone undiagnosed for 8 years just because somebody in her family who was a doctor had given her misinformed her by telling her that adults don't have ADHD. So for 8 years, for almost a decade, this woman thought something was wrong with her and
Mm.
it was her fault. She believed that for almost a decade. Imagine the damage that would have
Mm.
been done to her self-respect, her self-image, you know. So it's very so the damage, the repercussions of not getting diagnosis at an early age are huge, life changing, I would say. Yeah,
Mm.
it can destroy your life.
Yeah. And I hear also it can be pretty difficult actually get the diagnosis. I don't know how it's in Pakistan, but I know I was reading about it in the context of the UK, which the people
Hmm.
can wait up to of a couple of years, if I remember well, to get really officially
Yes,
a diagnosis, unless
you're
going to
right.
a private doctor and paying all the fees, of course.
Which is a lot, which is very expensive. You're right. I think it's more or less the challenges here are a little different. It's still difficult to diagnose because a lot of the doctors don't really understand it well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a big issue of stigma as well. It's very stigmatized. It's very looked down upon. It's seen more of as a moral failing than
Mm.
a neurological
Yeah.
disability.
Mm. And
So that's where the struggle is.
yeah. And I know we are, as we are going to continue in the conversation, we are still going to get back to the productivity because that's, I want to dig a bit deeper into it. But as you were talking
Sure.
about the stigma, and you are a man full of surprises because we know each other for, I think, 3 months. And just recently,
Yeah.
I learned that you ran your first marathon. And today, when I learned that actually you had a thing for wildlife conservation and being around animals, and that's something that really helped you to deal with your ADHD and with your healing. So could you share a bit more about this and how other people who are listening who might have ADHD might want to explore the strategies that might help them to
Mm.
deal with all the stigma, all the shame maybe they created over the years, not knowing they had ADHD?
Mm. I think one thing I would like to share is I think I got very lucky. Um, I think I had very supportive parents. And another way that I got lucky was I was very hyper focused on very healthy hobbies. So like taking care of animals and working with animals and rehabilitating them. So as a little kid, I've been, by the way, I think I must have started like when I was very, very young, like 8 years old, 10 years old, perhaps. I've always had a pet at home. Never have I gone like without a pet at home. And at one time, at the peak of my conservation work. By the way, I used to run my wildlife conservation center from my house. So, Zuzana,
Wow.
my house was literally a zoo at one point. They used to be like 80 plus birds, owls, eagles, dogs, ducks, parrots, like all sorts of pheasants, quails, everything you can imagine. Um, and so one thing that I now looking back that I recognize that happened was, you know, that hobby, that hyper focus on saving wildlife kept me away from all the other bad things that were happening around me. So like I never really got into drugs or anything of that sort. So I think it was really healing, and because also it helped me practice mindfulness in the moment. Like I never really had the need to meditate as as a kid, as a teenager, I remember, because I'll be working outside in the sun with animals, taking care of them. And it was very, very healing. it kept me, I think, and also because I had the support of my parents, I think it helped with the it took, there was no friction, because in a lot of the time, in a lot of brown families, there's a friction of like, hey, we want you to do your bachelor's in this, you have to become a doctor or like a PhD, a doctor, like, so there's a lot of academic pressure from families as well. My parents were very accommodating in that regard, so they let me do on the side whatever I wanted to, and that, I think, that really helped me sort of stay healthy and focused, and yeah, and it also gave me the time to really work on my ADHD, because those were my two passions growing up. Like, I was constantly working on myself during that time. I was very
Mm-hmm.
intentional about improving. I remember, like, I would talk to anybody and everybody who was struggling with ADHD. And I remember as a teenager, Suzanne, I must have talked to at least 1,000. I'm not even exaggerating. Through online communities, like we used to have Facebook, Instagram, all of that back then. Even I remember, like, I would talk to anybody and everybody, and there was so much kindness that I found in those communities. Everybody would be out to help each other, sharing stuff like, hey, there's a resource, I found, like, try this, talk to those people, watch this lecture, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's how I was growing up in my teenage years, in my 20s. Hmm.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think even listeners who are listening who do not have ADHD, this is very inspirational. Like really having a healthy hobby, that's something
Yes.
really which serves us, right? I can imagine it when you were talking about having a wildlife center in your house. It reminded me of my childhood. I was going to this like free time activities at one center for the animals. I remember feeding a bat and like taking care of the worms, and then at some point we established an animal cemetery at my grandfather's yard, which he was not happy about, so we collected all the dead animals. So I mean, you were at a different stage, you were trying to save them, we were dealing with those to get like proper funerals. But it, like, I think it's really helpful, like, to put our focus on something that makes us happy, and something that is healthy. So I
Mm.
think there are like lots of like inspirational things in really having something we love doing, and not only when we are children or teenager, but I would say especially when we are
Yeah,
adults, because if we
I
focus
agree.
only on the work or the business or being a mother or being a
Yeah.
father, I think it's just part of the life, and generally the wholesomeness of the life will not be that great because we will be bumping in the other areas. And
Mm.
Haseeb, if we can go a bit back into the productivity. I know that you have big goals. You said you want to support 1 million people with ADHD. You are trying to promote a coaching culture in Pakistan. And you have amazing big dreams and you're doing great stuff. And my clients and the people I work with, they have the same aspirations. I mean, not the same as in doing the same things, but they have big dreams as well. So I believe, and you will talk more about that, if somebody has ADHD, it doesn't mean they can't get stuff done, right? So can you talk a bit
Yeah.
more like how you can get stuff done if you have ADHD? What you have to consider, what you have to do differently?
Hmm. I think the important bit here is to understand that you have to build a support system for yourself that works for you specifically, because ADHD is a spectrum disorder. So everybody who has ADHD, they don't have the same issues, the same challenges, right? So everybody is very unique in their own ADHD-ness, let's call it, right? So the way I went about it is I'm a big planner person, Susanna. Like, let me show you my 2024's planner. This is my new planner for this year. It's a passion planner that I use, and I've been using this, Susanna, for the past 8 years. This is my ninth planner. So
Mm-hmm.
imagine, like, I have a mountain high data. Like, imagine all the data that I have over the past almost a decade now, almost 8 years back. I can look back 8 years back, and I can if you ask me, Haseeb, what were you doing on a Tuesday 8 years ago, I can tell you what time I went to sleep, whether I brushed my teeth or not, what was I doing, what was I struggling with, you know, what self-care routine did I have that day, that much detail. So this is just one tool in my arsenal, in my support system toolbox, that I used. And it's funny now that I look back, um, it's it has become a part of my value system, almost. And it's funny, I was talking to my mother the other day, and we were laughing about how this planner has become such an integral part of my life. And I was just sharing with them, like, I've recognized that now whatever goals that I write down, they always like come true. It's as if like this is a magic book of sorts. Like whatever I write down, it comes true, you know. And that's the power of, like, building systems, support systems for yourself. So what kind of support system do you want to build for yourself? What do I have in my support system? I have my planners. I work with my own coaches. There are coaches above me who help support me. If I ever need therapy, I go to therapy. I do yoga. I do qigong, meditation, sleeping well, eating right, having a balanced social life. There's so many aspects to it. So it's very important to have that balance when it comes to building a support system. And everybody will have a unique support system. Okay? And that's very important to say. It's not
Yeah.
like, okay, what I'm using, you have to use. No. So you have to find, and this happened after a lot of experimentation. That's another important thing that I want to bring up. So it's a lot of experimenting that needs to happen for you to find that sweet spot where you are your most productive self,
Yeah, this is amazing. And actually, the way I think, like you just said, what I tell to myself and my clients all the time, that to find ways for us to be most productive, to be most healthy, is about experimentation. I really say that to almost like everybody. And I think it's so much true that we expect like this quick fix solution, but often I say it's 2 steps ahead, 1 step back, and we really need to experiment with things what work for us. And I love your planner. I'm also a planning
Thank
person,
you.
but my planner is not that fancy as yours, but
Wow,
it has
I like yours
colors.
too. It's nice.
And again, you're a man full of surprises, because I had no idea you're doing Qigong, and that's something which I have been doing also since I was 18. And I think the Qigong and Tai
Oh,
Chi took
wonderful.
me through lots of stressful periods. And now, unfortunately, I don't have
Very-
my teacher. My teacher's in Sweden. I think he will be celebrating 86 years this year. So he's
Wow,
amazing. I hope to
awesome.
go and visit him
That's
in
wonderful.
August. But just as you said, like building a support, whether you have ADHD or not, is
Oh,
so
no. Yeah.
important.
Yes.
And I know we talked about the stigma a bit, but I still had one question prepared for you about this. Like, in your experience, what happened to yourself or your clients? What are the most damaging stereotypes when it comes to people with ADHD and their productivity, ability to work or achieve their goals? And what is the truth
The most,
about these stereotypes?
hmm, I think the most, these are very well known, common, unfortunately, very common stereotypes, Um, I think this has everything to do with, the kind of people that we surround ourselves with, and the stereotypes are like we all hear, oh, this is your fault, you're doing this intentionally, you are intentionally being lazy, um mislabeling people, shaming people, that's the struggle that most ADHDers go through. um I remember reading somewhere that by the age of 10 years old, a kid with ADHD receives 20,000 more negative inputs from people around them as compared to their neurotypical peers. Imagine. So, just multiply that. I don't even have the data on that, but imagine a lifetime of negative extra input that
Yeah,
an undiagnosed person with ADHD would
yeah,
have
that
experienced.
sounds tough. And just to
It's
add on this
soul.
number, I read it just recently. It's funny. Are we reading the same books that before the age of 5, we on average hear the word no 40,000 times. Meanwhile, yes, we hear just 8,000 times. So that means like 5 times
Oh,
more no's
yeah.
than yeses. So which is something like that determines us and our belief that we can do what we want. But imagining like another like 20,000 more negative inputs up to the age of 10, that sounds even tougher.
Uh, that's just a 10-year-old. He's a kid, just imagine. So I think the biggest stigma is the judgment that we
Mm,
receive from people around us. That's what crushes souls, and that is what destroys dreams of people.
mm,
And so I think if we take away the judgment, and then that was the main reason I started publicly talking about it. That was the reason I became an ADHD coach,
mhm,
because I want, especially in a community like mine, in South Asian communities, people rarely talk about mental health, and nobody ever volunteers and be like, hey, I have a disability that I want to talk about. Nobody really does that, do they? Even experts like therapists, psychiatrists, they never volunteer and tell you, oh, I have that disorder myself. No, they would talk about stuff, sure,
mm,
experts do, but you would really see advocates showing up in brown communities, South Asian communities, volunteering to publicly openly share with people what they struggle with. And so that's one way that I try to tackle with it in my community, I think. And that's one of the reasons I think I'm able to connect with so many people. And that's also one of the reasons I have this big goal of like, that's why I chose the number 1 million people, not 100. That because I feel like there's so many people who want to be heard and want and are craving that sort of acceptance.
mm,
And so that's what I'm trying to do right now. Try to break away from that stigma of judgment, and bring them towards acceptance.
mhm. Yeah, and my fingers crossed. I'm sure you will achieve that goal. I can't wait to celebrate that once you do. And Hasib, there
Thank
was
you.
another thing that caught my eye, and you said that one of your life mantras is seeking
Yeah.
discomfort. Can you tell us a
Yes.
bit more about that?
Yes, I would love to. I would love to. So, okay, if you were to ask me, Hasib, how did you heal yourself? How did you work? How did you bring about your ADHD? How did you sort of turn it into something that you use as your strength today? I think my secret, here's the secret, Zuzana. This is a secret
Yes.
that I can, if there's one secret I can share with people listening today, is make your life smarter, to seek discomfort. Because the day I started to get comfortable with being uncomfortable was the day when I started seeing the most amount of growth in myself. So I would, just to give an example, let's humanize this for 1 second. I'll tell you about how I went about it. So the number one that I think the first thing that I ever did, when the first thing that I seek discomfort, was I was very socially anxious as a kid, Susanna, and I hated introducing myself. So I remember I found this really supportive online community, and I volunteered. I literally volunteered, and I was like, "Hey guys, I am super shy and I hate introducing myself, and I would love for you guys to sort of challenge me, and I would love to talk to you and introduce myself to strangers, basically." So I volunteered myself to talk to strangers and introduce myself. And by the end of that week, I kid you not, Susan, I must have talked to like more than 100 people by the end of that week. Everybody. So I asked them to randomly call me. I shared my details. I was like, hey, I want to, and I will force myself into accepting the call. So whoever and it was a global community. So like random, people from all over the world would be calling me like, hey, Hasib, we saw your
I love
challenge and we wanted
this.
to say. And so by the end of the week, I had talked to like 100 people, I think, at least. And there were so many people that reached out. And I remember I would be literally sweating, Susanna, as I would be talking to these people, but I got over it. So that was like one small way. And another time I remember I moved to a new city where I knew nobody, and I was really struggling with my anxiety. I didn't have any friends there. So every night for dinner, what I did was I started seeking rejection in a way. And I used to call these rejection therapy challenges is what's it called. So I would go out intentionally seeking rejection, and one way I would do it is I would walk up to strangers. So every night the challenge I put to myself was I'm never going to have dinner alone. So whenever I go out for dinner, I would go and approach a stranger, the most intimidating person group, that I could see. I would approach them, Susanna, and I'd be like, "Hey guys, I'm new in town. Can I sit with you guys?" And I would just approach them, and it was such a amazing experience. It's funny. I never really got rejected. Nobody was rude to me, and I got that opportunity to make so many new friends, that way. So by the end of that month, I remember I must have, like, I made so many friends in that new city. And so yeah, that's another way that I seek discomfort. Then oh my God, there was so many crazy stuff that I would do. Like, I would literally I would literally, I would push myself into seeking rejection wherever I would go. Like, I would make that my motto. So, like, for example, I would uh, I would walk into a bookstore. And so one assumption that everybody has about bookstores, they don't really lend you books, do they? They sell books, right? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna pick the most expensive looking books and I'm gonna ask them to lend me them. So intentionally seeking rejection. They were like, hey, we don't do that. And I'm like, thank you for that rejection. And I would just walk out. Or like I would walk into a clothing store and I'd be like, hey, can I have a burger and shakes, please? Ridiculous stupid stuff. Like, there's no way they sell clothes, they don't sell burgers and shakes, do they? And so intentionally pushing myself, putting myself in these spaces where I would be rejected, or I would be seeking discomfort, or where I would be nervous. And that sort of became my mantra in life. So now what ended up happening is I don't assume anything whenever I approach a person, a situation, any social setting. I don't assume anything about anybody, really. And what that does is that always it opens so many possibilities, really. You're not
Yeah.
self-rejecting. I think that's the biggest gift I gave myself, Susanna.
It's
Um,
amazing.
I,
I
I don't
love it.
uh, I don't self-reject now. I think
And
that's such a big gift.
yeah, and that's how we grow, right? Like, if we
Yeah.
stay in our comfort zone, we are going to stay where we are at this moment, and challenging ourselves is so important if we want to grow. And I love how you said that you learn not to assume anything. At some point, actually, even in my city here in Zambia, I challenged myself to ask random people for coffee because I wanted to make friends. And you
That's
can really
wonderful.
meet people, you can make some
Yeah.
friends. Sometimes it will be a bit awkward, but I think it's really good to challenge ourselves because you never know what might come up from it. And I mean, I would love to hear more stories what you have done, because it's really inspirational. It's like, what else I can do? And actually, in my quarterly
I
plan, one of the things I have is challenge myself more, because I have done that with my
mm,
TEDx talk. I was like, I applied, and then I was
huh,
practicing my speech, and I was like, oh my goodness, what did
have to
I do?
show off.
Why am I doing
Yeah,
this?
you have to
Why did
show
I
off.
apply? But it was amazing, right?
You pushed yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. So
You
it's,
seek discomfort. That's what you did.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Haseeb, as we are coming to the end of the interview, I have a couple of questions I ask all my guests, because I want the men and women who are listening to get inspired and go to the action, because that's where the power is. Um,
Yeah.
so the first question is, what lifts you up when you feel like giving up?
Hmm. What lifts me up? I think connection. I think meaningful connection lifts me up. And I think that's what my job is as a coach. That's what I do. So I literally created my dream job, and at the core of it is what brings me, joy. It's the connecting with people, supporting people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can relate to that. Yesterday, I had actually not so great day, and what always makes
Okay.
me feel happier and better is having a client, because then I forget about
Mm.
myself. I focus on him or her, and
Yeah,
I just love
yeah,
coaching. So that always like lifts me up,
yeah,
and I think it's really about the connection and seeing like how you can support other people and get inspired. I always get inspired by my clients who they try to do amazing stuff. So that
yeah.
brings me to the next question. Who inspires you and why?
Hmm. Who inspires me? I think I'm a very spiritual person. So I think I'm very much rooted in my religious beliefs. So I think that's where I get my inspiration from my religious beliefs, and that's my solid foundation that I've built for myself.
Okay. And as I
Mm.
said, this podcast is to inspire people to take action. So if there is one thing you would want the listeners to do right after listening to this episode, what would that thing be? What would you want them to do right now?
I would love for them. I think if I had the power to make them do something, I think I would I would invite them to seek discomfort in their own lives in whatever way possible. And I would like to tell them, like, you don't have to start big. You don't have to be like, really, just start small. And that's how I started. Really, I started by, in the smallest of ways. Like, I would literally, if I was feeling nervous, I would just ask somebody for directions, as small as that. Like, ask somebody for directions or something. So you don't have to see discomfort in the biggest way possible straight away.
Yeah, we don't have to start asking for books being lent to us from a bookshop, but do something quite regular. Yeah. And
Just
Hasib,
some directions. Yeah,
so Hasib, you have
please go ahead.
shared so many great points. So I believe they're really inspirational. I'm already in my head thinking this what discomfort I can look for after I finish today and come out with my son of the house. So
I
I'm
love that.
already thinking. Uh,
I
as
love
you
that.
said, like you coach people, I know that your clients are from all over. So where we can
Yeah.
find you and what you have to offer if somebody has been listening to this conversation, maybe they have been struggling with ADHD and they're like, Hasib is the coach for me. Where can we find you?
Yeah. They can find me on Instagram. I go by ADHD_Haseeb. That's my Instagram handle. They can also email me directly. My email address is adhdcoaching with Haseeb@gmail.com.
And
So
it will
that's
be in the show
ADHD
notes as
coaching
well.
with Yes, perfect. So they can email me if they want to. They can reach out to me on Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever is convenient, really. So that's what I tried. That's one thing that I tried to do, Zuzana. I try to make it as convenient for people to reach out for help, because I think when somebody's struggling, just even reaching out for help is it's such a hurdle, really. So I think that's the least we can do. So I'd be happy to connect, have a coffee if anybody wants to talk and discuss, whatever they are going through. I will be more than happy to help for sure.
Okay, so as I said, all the links, how you can connect with Hasib will be in the show notes, so reach out. And as Hasib said, you don't have to do it alone. So thank you so much
No,
for being here. It was my pleasure talking to you, and I'm still
thank you
curious
for
how
having
many
me,
more things
Zuzana.
I will learn about you. But
Yeah,
it was really
thank you for
great to
having
have
me.
you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.